What's going on, folks? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. It's time for another episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit, this time in Pathfinder 1st Edition. Today, by patron request, we're looking at building around a non-lethal sneak attack build using Enforcer and Cornigon Smash. So we're going to yell at people and get a lot of value out of it, essentially. If you're liking what you're seeing, remember to like, subscribe, and ding the bell. And remember that Patreon at any tier gets you a Google Sheet where this bad boy is built up and ready to go for you, as well as a whole archive at this point of Pathfinder 1st and 2nd Edition build concepts. And also starting next week, I think we're gonna break into Starfinder just a little bit, which I'm very excited for. But for now, let's hit it. Alrighty, so today's build is a lot of things. A very good marshal, someone who can stand in the front line, dish out a bunch of damage, take a bunch of damage, while also providing a potent and terrifyingly reliable debuff. It is both simultaneously very unique in the sense of a lot of character optimization in this edition. Traditionally, it involves taking a lot of damage and applying it directly to the forehead of your enemy, while also being a build concept that has seen a lot of support. Truly, there are 5,000 ways to skin this owlbear, which makes it all the more interesting. For today's classes, we're looking at 10 levels of Rogue and 10 levels of Barbarian. Our particular flavor of anger will come from the Deep Water Rager archetype. It does a lot of weird things, it does a lot of underwater things. It gives you an ability called Spiraling Charge, which says you're not required to move in a straight line when you charge, provided that no space you move into while charging is farther away from your target than the space you are leaving. You have to be able to see the target at the beginning of the charge. You can't use this while mounted. That's just kind of interesting icing on the cake. Mostly strong lungs is what we're here for. A Deep Water Rager can hold their breath for a number of rounds equal to 4 times their con score. They do not reduce the duration of their held breath by taking a standard or full round action, which I guess is interesting if you're playing this in Skull and Shackles. Also, don't at me about how we're playing a fire race who's taking a water archetype. It's interesting, damn it. But more importantly, as long as the Deepwater Rager is able to speak, they add their Constitution modifier to Intimidate skill checks in addition to their Charisma modifier. When we grab the Intimidating Prowess feat on top of this, which lets us add our Strength in addition to our Charisma modifier, that means we are adding 3 ability scores into a single check, which is nuts. It's also incredibly useful in a world where we want to beat that DC by multiples of 5. But to be clear, to demoralize an opponent with Intimidate, you roll an Intimidate check against a DC of 10 plus the target's hit dice plus the target's Wisdom modifier. If you are successful, the target is shaken for a round. It increases by 1 by every 5 for which you beat the DC. They have to be within 30 feet. They have to be able to clearly see and hear you. You can't create a stronger fear condition. You can only extend the shaken debuff, which is of course a -2 untyped penalty on attack rolls, saving throws, skill checks, and ability checks. Or essentially everything they're doing. We'll be stacking 2 Unchained Rogue archetypes on the Rogue half. The original request was for a Thug. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that a Thug can do can be done with weapon enchants, and they don't stack with what I think is a little bit better of an archetype for this particular kind of build. That is to say, the Rake. Whenever a Rake hits an opponent and deals sneak attack damage, they can forego 1d6 points of that damage and make a free Intimidate check to demoralize. For every additional d6 points of sneak attack damage they forego, they receive a +5 circumstance bonus on this check. So at the end of the day, when we're looking at sneak attack 5d6, essentially a +25 to the DC, or what almost certainly results in 3 or 4 more rounds of the debuff going on. Scout gives us the ability to, whenever we make a charge or move more than 10 feet in a round and make an attack action, our attacks deal sneak attack damage as if the target was flat-footed. Unless, of course, they happen to have uncanny dodge. And it will only ever apply to the first attack, at least for the purpose of Skirmisher. Being able to charge in funny lines means almost certainly you can always get a flank with you and the other marshal to make sure you're just throwing debuffs around. Speaking of debuffs, of course, we are relying on the ability to make things afraid. In addition, we are relying on non-lethal damage in this build, both of which are easily countered by a GM by using monsters which are immune to either effect. Y'all know how I feel about immunities versus the players, and if you don't, you can follow this card right up here, and I will get you learnt. Today we will be rolling up an Ifrit for this, particularly a Sun Soul Ifrit for their strength and charisma buffs, which are pretty darn useful for us. In addition, the Ifrit Rogue's favored class bonus, adding +1/2 on acrobatics checks to jump, sure, and +1/2 bonus on intimidate checks to demoralize, much more important, is enormous and easy to get value out of, especially given that we will not be taking 20 levels of Rogue, only 10. That will stack up to a +5 over the course of our career. For our alternate racial traits, of which there are a couple, we're going to need mostly human, because indeed we need to be able to count as humans as well as native outsiders for all purposes, such as, say, the enlarge person spell, which we will almost certainly want to get permanent at some point in our career, because remember kids, for every size difference there is between you and your target, there is a + or -4 on your intimidate check, depending if you are bigger or smaller than the thing you're shouting at. In return, we do not automatically gain, in our case, Ignin, and we are vulnerable to things like Charm Person, but it's a necessary trade-off. On top of that, Ifriti magic replacing the spell-like lets us cast either Enlarge or Reduce Person once per day. We can use this to affect other Ifrits as though they were a humanoid, or we can just buff ourselves up once a day and have that buff to what we're doing. However, we're mostly here for the Fiery Glare trait, which will give us the ability to always take 10 on intimidate checks even in combat. Or, essentially, from jump, take all of the randomness out of the RNG and just settle for average on something that we can boost into the stratosphere, ergo average is enough. This is one of those few times where all the weird random mods you can stack on a thing actually pay off. Berserker of the Society for your second trait, keeping us raging for longer. If you feel like reactionary-ing for a drawback, y'all know what you want to do. For your stat priority, the two most important stats on this build are your strength and constitution. Not only do they help fuel what we're trying to do mechanically, they also help us hit harder, last longer, and in general, not die, which really lets us double dip here. And this is one of those rare examples of how strength can be used for something other than hitting. Charisma next up, because of course that feeds the Intimidate machine as well. You'll want a little bit of Dexterity and Wisdom just because they're important stats, and throw it to the floor. But for now, let's talk about feats. Of course, level 1, right out the gate, Intimidating Prowess, to give us what is ostensibly an enormous fuck-off Intimidate skill from jump. Remember, you can Rage and essentially get a +4 on Intimidate while doing so. At level 3, we'll take the Hurtful feat. You'll notice you see Power Attack as a prerequisite for that. But I'm a big old fan of Elephant in the Room here in this house, and I don't see myself ever building any build within the bounds of Pathfinder 1st Edition without it or my own homebrew these days, and you can follow this card right up here if you'd like to learn more about removing feat taxes in Pathfinder, as that truly is. But whenever you successfully demoralize an opponent within your melee reach with an Intimidate check, you can make a single melee attack against that creature as a swift action. If your attack fails to damage the target, its shaking condition from being demoralized immediately ends. Pretty darn good, given that, at least in the beginning, we'll be intimidating as a standard action, ergo not getting the chance to attack. Gets even cooler once we get our rake levels online though. Run up, attack, deal sneak attack damage, forego some of the damage dice, make a free intimidate check to demoralize. If the check is successful, we then just swing again, and this time don't get rid of the sneak attack we would get from swinging at a flanked thing, and then the rest of the attacks in the full attack action. See where I'm going with this? It's real mean. Eventually, we will be retraining out of our next feat. It's very good now, and I don't want to wait until level 15 or our 5th rogue level to get this. Signature skill. It requires 5 ranks in the chosen skill. We will choose Intimidate. It gives us access to the skill unlocks from Pathfinder Unchained that the Unchained Rogue gets. In the case of Intimidate at 5 ranks, if you exceed the DC to demoralize a target by at least 10, it is frightened for a round and shaken thereafter. A will save at DC 10 plus your number of ranks in Intimidate negates the frightened condition, but the target is still shaken even if it has the Stalwart ability. Or in other words, takes a -2 penalty on attack rolls, saves, and skill checks, and must flee from the source of its fear as best as it can, aka you, meaning you probably provoke an attack of opportunity from it leaving your space, though technically the creature in question retains its mental faculties and can like use the withdrawal action or something. But if you've got the board under lock enough, easy enough to send them to sleeping with the fishes. At 10 ranks, you get the panicked condition for 1 round or frightened for 1d4 and shaken thereafter. A panicked creature, of course, must drop anything they're holding and flee at top speed from the source of their fear, as well as any other danger they encounter along a random path. They can't take any other actions. They take a -2 on all the things. If cornered, a panicked creature cowers and does not attack, typically using total defense. They can use special abilities to flee, or in other words, just knock somebody out of the combat. And they're still debuffed even if you fail. At 15 ranks, you can set them to cowering for a round or panicked for a d4 and frightened thereafter. At 20, they go to cowering for a d4 and panicked thereafter. Bonk somebody in the head, they fail their save, off they go. And if they pass their save, they're shaken, which means they have a -2 on the next save coming from the next attack. Shit's real gross. Level 7, Cornigon Smash. When you damage an opponent with power attack, you may make an immediate Intimidate check as a free action in an attempt to demoralize your opponent, or ostensibly every time we swing for free Intimidate, and then we are off to the races. Now, it takes us to level 9 to get to the Enforcer feat, which is one of the key parts of the build. I chose to wait this long, not only to get the big stuff out of the way first, but because it may take a while, depending on your game, to get enough gold to make sure you can grab the Merciful enchantment, making any weapon do non-lethal damage without a penalty. Now, I didn't want to grab this earlier on and not know what your financial situation was looking like. Anyway, whenever you deal non-lethal damage with a melee weapon, you can make an Intimidate check to demoralize your target as a free action. If you are successful, the target is shaken for a number of rounds equal to the damage dealt, or frightened if it was a crit. Meaning that even if you decide to not power attack, Enforcer still fires on. And also, I may be wrong on this. My heart is telling me that I play and GM several editions, and I'm brain farting. Diving through forums, it seems to be very convoluted as to whether or not both Hurtful and Cornigon Smash would proc from the same attack. I want to say you can only get one free action in response to a certain thing. But if I'm wrong, hey, you're essentially rolling with advantage plus. Good, very good. Next up, now that we're into our rogue levels, we'll take Sap Adept. Whenever you use a bludgeoning weapon to deal non-lethal sneak attack, you gain a bonus on your damage equal to the number of sneak attack damage dice you rolled. Now, sometimes we will be foregoing these, yes, of course. But when we're not, and we really just want to send someone into the realm of Nighty-Night, extra damage looks good on everyone. It's Big Brother next, Sap Master. Whenever you use a bludgeoning weapon to deal non-lethal sneak attack damage to a flat-footed opponent, roll your sneak attack damage twice, totaling the results as your non-lethal sneak attack damage for the attack. Or more dice to feed to the Intimidate machine, or more dice to choose between, like, here's my Intimidate pool, and here's my beat you in the temple with my, what even martial weapon do we use here? A heavy flail, I'm gonna say. Why not? We never build around what is a very scary weapon that I have to imagine many a knight in the Middle Ages bonked themselves in the head with, but it's got a decent threat range and damage dice, especially for this kind of weapon. Sure, Violent Display comes next. We need weapon focus. We'll choose weapon focus from one of our rogue talents, of course, getting us the entire flail weapon group. Whenever you land a successful sneak attack or confirm a crit against a creature with a weapon you have weapon focus in, you can use Dazzling Display as an immediate action. Rogues get rogue talents. One of those rogue talents gives you a combat feat. Dazzling Display will be the combat feat chosen once we have weapon focus with flails. It does the same thing we've been doing, except it demoralizes everyone within 30 feet who can see you swing a flail over your head before bludgeoning the dude in the back of the head with it. Gross. Level 15 also will be the level we get the skill unlock for Intimidate on our own, almost all the way up too. At that point, you can retrain signature skill into skill focus, choosing Intimidate. Because what's a +6 on the thing we're trying to do between friends, right? Exactly. Shatter Defenses next up. Any shaken, frightened, or panicked opponent hit by you this round is flat-footed to your attacks until the end of your next turn. Ergo, any shaken, frightened, or panicked opponent is vulnerable to your sneak attacks, cheating skirmishers prereq of you only get your sneak attack against the first. Lol. As you continue to just beat the shit out of them. Last but not least, Dastardly Finish. A level after this will be reliably making the bad guys cower. By the time we get it, if we can get them in a corner where they can't flee, cower indeed they will. Now we can coup de grace them. Dunzo. For our rage powers and our rogue talents, Lesser Beast Totem is first. We'll take that entire line because we like to charge a lot in this build. Lesser Beast Totem is kind of just a sad tax at first, giving you those claw attacks. Though they do 1d6 points of slashing damage. If there happens to be a merciful amulet of Mighty Fist laying around somewhere, why not? Intimidating Glare will be next, which lets you make intimidate checks against adjacent foes as a move action. And if it succeeds, you demoralize them for 1d4 rounds plus 1 round instead of the standard 1, and we'll later on proc things if we're not trying to move. Leveling into Beast Totem now, while raging at level 6, the Barbarian gets a +1 nat armor bonus, scaling +1 for every 4 levels the Barbarian has attained, so 2 when we get it, and even more as we go. Then Superstition, because all Barbarians love buffing out their saves versus magic, the thing you're saving against the most. Follow that up later on with Greater Beast Totem, so we can have Pounce when we charge, we can full attack, and lay the hurt in, lay the smack down, knock folks out. Should have paid their bar tab that much faster. It's on them, really. For the rogue talents, Weapon Focus out the gate, choosing the Flail's weapon group if you're using Elephant in the Room, or the Heavy Flail otherwise. Then Dazzling Display, again, with the combat feat. And then for even more fun, Befuddling Strike at our 6th rogue level. Whenever we deal sneak attack damage against an opponent, they take a -2 on attack rolls for 1d4 rounds against us, which stacks real nice with the other debuffs we and presumably the rest of the party are throwing around. Next, Got Your Back. Once per round as an immediate action, you may expend an add-op to attempt the aid another check to improve an ally's attack. I really like this one for our build. At first glance, it feels a little off flavor, but really debuffing them and buffing everyone else, or bullying someone while bringing up your friends who see you as like the big boss in the party is horrible, and talk to your players before you be that asshole, but it's also very on flavor. And so here we are. Then Opportunist last. Once per round, the rogue can make an add-op against an opponent who has just been struck for damage in melee by another character, and the shake, rattle, and roll goes even harder. By this point, they're reliably making will saves against just flat cowering, just flat being dunzo. Now, before we do some math, and I think we do need to do some math on this one just because it's super rude, let's look at some key magic items. First, of course, the Merciful Enchantment, key to this build, key to our ability to do non-lethal without a penalty. On top of that, the Cruel Enchantment. When the wielder strikes a creature that is frightened, shaken, or panicked with a cruel weapon, they become sickened for a round. When the wielder uses the weapon to knock unconscious or kill a creature, they gain 5 temp HP. Sickened, of course, is a -2 on attack, damage, saves, skills, and ability checks, stacking on another super scary debuff. And sure, this only lasts for a round, but if you're reliably attacking the same person over and over again, and I bet you could be, it might as well be forever. Gravelly Tonic at the low price of 50 gold is a sludgy tonic that resembles the tank of iron shavings. It causes your voice to become deep and more grating for an hour when you drink it, and probably tears the shit out of your throat, but we aren't worried about that. Giving you a +5 alchemical bonus on intimidate checks, stacks with all the things, is pretty darn cheap at low level, and easy peasy to buy at high level. Get as many of these as you can, as well as from jump a Masterwork tool, which grants you a +2 circumstance bonus on the related skill check, in our case, Intimidate. And fun fact, the circumstance bonus stacks with other circumstance bonuses, unless they arise from essentially the same source, so we'll have this on forever. So even after our rogue levels, this still provides value. What's even cooler about this is it seems to be a flavor to taste kind of tool, functioning however would make sense for that for you, though some may not work in some circumstances. I feel like War Paint is the go-to here, but you do you, boo. Probably the most expensive item on our bucket list that's not our flail, the Perennimin, a chest slot item which has lots of big Osirion flavor. It gives you a +4 on Diplomacy and Intimidate untyped. Once per day, it lets you geese another creature, compelling it to undertake a mission for you. gives you a +2 deflection to AC, which is meh, given that you probably have a ring at this point. And 3 times per day, you can give yourself and all loyal subjects of yourself, aka your friends, within 30 feet, heroism. Of course, this item only grants its benefits to a loyal subject of its master, the pharaoh whose cartouche is inscribed in it. But like by the time you have this amount of money, it's easy enough to go find someone to fix that for you. The ominous enchantment adds our enhancement bonus from our weapon to intimidate checks, gives us a free shaken sometimes, mostly this is just another buff. And the furious enchantment, while under the effects of a rage, weapons enhancement bonus is +2, better than normal. And of course, the big 6 are incredibly important for this in every build. Follow this card right up here if you don't know what the heck that means. Now let's look at some math. The simplest math, truly. It's mind-blowing how good this is. Check this shit out. Yeah, you see that? You see that number where my cursor is? Of course you do, because it's dumb is why. Now let's talk about it. With Fiery Glare, we are ostensibly taking 10 every time when we roll Intimidate. At the end of the day, assuming 20 ranks in Intimidate, a +9 from Skill Focus, plus that being a trained skill, a +52, Circumstance bonus from Rake and Masterwork tools, 50 of that coming from 10d6 sneak attack after Sap Master goes off, then 4 from the Pranaman, 5 from your Spooky Enchantment, because I can't say the word ominous right now to save my mortal soul. Oh wait, there it is, never mind. And 5 from Gravelly Tonic, 105. That's your Intimidate check at the end of the day, before adding your Strength, your Constitution, or your Charisma. It really makes you feel like by the end of the day, you could just retrain all of those Barbarian levels and go Rogue 20 and just come out way, way better. Early game, though, I really like being able to add several ability scores into one thing since we don't have that big fuck off circumstance bonus yet. I don't even know what to compare 105 to. That number is so... what the fuck? I'm going to assume Cthulhu. Now, again, technically Cthulhu is immune because he's immune to mind affecting, but we're literally just putting numbers against numbers here. Cthulhu has 36 hit dice, plus 10 is 46, a wisdom of 36, which is a modifier of 13. Under my house rules, he would receive a +4 bonus against this in lieu of the immunity, meaning we'd need to beat a 63. We do so before adding any numbers at all by 42, meaning in one shot we have the biggest, baddest, great old one this side of Carcosa, and probably the other side as well, shaking in its non-Euclidean boots against us. Now imagine this against something much, much smaller. A very reliable debuff against the little things. It will be very easy for you to send them just fleeing in terror, and if you can't, you still have Big Con and Big Strong and Big Fuck Off Flail, so just pounce on them and beat them to death, right? It's really, really cool. And yes, indeed, I know I didn't do the calculation between colossal and presumably large. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, my math is off a little bit, but it's still just that whole combat, probably. There's the debuff, here comes everybody else swinging in. In the optimized party, and you can follow this card right up here for that. As I remind myself yet again, I'd really like to remake that in first edition, or at least remake a really optimized party in general. Punisher, Punisher, and Punisher. Even better if you were to give the character like a Lucerne hammer. Suddenly they have a huge threat range, people are frightened, running away, it provokes, give them the bonk. While your more damage-based things are able to swing in and stand more reliably in the front line, what with the bad guys all being shaken, and your witches, wizards, and so on have lower will saves versus their saver sucks. But that's all the time I have for today. What do y'all think? How do you intimidate people in Pathfinder 1st Edition? What did I miss? What would you do differently? Throw it in the comments. Next week, I have like 4 requests to optimize a Starfinder character. Starfinder, next week. Very excited. I'll see y'all next time.